With my first child, who you've met, I really wanted a home birth, and I was very adamant to have a natural home birth. And 3 days in, it was, my cervix wasn't dilating, and I was, the option my midwife and doula gave me was, it's time to think about going to the hospital. And it's interesting because then we went to the hospital, I got pain meds and was able to deliver her. And I spent several years feeling like a failure. Like, oh my gosh, I didn't deliver her the way that I wanted to deliver her. And to your point, I really, one of the principles that I am trying to impart upon all women is that we all have unique paths. Our body is miraculous. We often need to bring in other resources to help us. And when you look at things through the lens of birth, there is no such thing as failure. It is however that baby came out. Yeah, however that baby came out, it came out, and you were a part of that process. So it took me several years to really come to that healing. So I love the way you said it about the C-section, because I think that the actual growing of a baby and birthing of a baby from a female lens that's power. That is incredible of that whole process, and deserves the respect, no matter whatever path you took.
Yeah. And the recovery after a cesarean, I stopped calling it a C-section because I realized we need to remember that a baby got born. It was a birth.
Yes.
And empower those women and say, thank you, thank you, thank you. And also believing in those women so that they have an opportunity to plan for their next birth as best they feel motivated, however that is. And we just had a beautiful experience 7 months ago. Our head of medicine at Bumi Sehat in Bali, Dr. Dayu, had her vaginal birth after cesarean, surrounded by her best friends, the team of midwives there. And the last day of her pregnancy, she was following me around. First of all, I showed up at Bumi Sehat and I said, why are you still here? You're 41 weeks and 5 days pregnant. Maybe it's time for you to take a day off. And she said, have you met my mother-in-law? I always say mother-in-law. I don't say mother-in-law because
I love that. I love mother-in-law. That's so good.
Yeah. We have to start honoring our crones with, for the love that they are. And so Dr. Dayu says to me, she says, my mother-in-law is part of the reason that I went to the hospital to have my first baby and got induced. My baby went into deep, as you know, because, I was there. Her baby went into deep depression and distress. And suddenly, while her husband was buying a bottle of water, she was rushed into the delivery room, and she was, the baby was born by a cesarean birth. It was not her plan. And nobody prepares for that. It's very difficult if, like your birth plan is suddenly hijacked. And her husband couldn't find her when he came back minutes later. She was gone. And he wasn't allowed to see her for 6 hours. And he's a doctor as well, and she's a doctor. And she was separated from their baby for 13 hours. And she knows that during that 13 hours, their little boy was so traumatized because where's my whole universe? Babies don't understand the concept of time yet. They haven't got that lens. And so after a while, there's no by and by, I'll see my mom. There's like, oh, I'm all alone in a plastic box. And they call it an isolette for a reason because it isolates them. And so this little boy had, when you would see him at Bumi Sehat, he was very inward. He wasn't running to people and hugging like the other children. He was very traumatized, and he was so showered with love and so wanted. And with this second baby, 5 years later or so, Dr. Dayu was just like, I'm going to be in Bumi Sehat at work because that's my happy, safe place. And then I noticed her husband was hanging out there, whenever he had time away from, he's a professor of medicine. He would be there, and her little boy. And then she followed me around for that last day, and she said, tell me what to do. Tell me what to do. That That was shocking for me. I looked at her and I said, why would I tell one of the 10 most intelligent humans that I know on this planet what to do? Because you have an inner knowing that's strong and full of courage, and so full of love that I don't care if you want to have your baby down at the river or at the hospital or here at Bumi Sehat. I'm going to be there with you. I'll follow you there because I believe in you. Your inner knowing is so alive. I believe in you.
Yes.
And she started crying, and she just leaned against me, and she kept saying, you believe in me? And I would just say, yeah, I believe in you. I believe in you. And a few hours later, that night, she went into labor naturally without being induced. And we had looked at her cycles really carefully during this pregnancy. And I pointed out, you have long cycles, so you're not going to have your baby right at 40 weeks. And she and her husband came in. She was like, check me. I want to know how dilated I am. She was 4 centimeters. They were calling me. And as I was running to Bumi Sehat, her water released and her baby was coming. So she had a beautiful, glorious vaginal birth after cesarean, and was so proud of her. I'm still so proud of her. And I love to see her talking to every single woman who comes in who's had a cesarean birth and say, look, you can do this. And there are things that she encourages them to do. And one of them we really notice is the oxytocin receptors. And as you know, in your field, oxytocin is monogamous with her receptors. She only goes to her receptors. And how do you get more oxytocin receptors? You better be hugging your daughters. If you want them to give birth gloriously, hug those girls. You bet, they're walking around from before they're born. They've got the eggs, the oocytes, the not yet fully developed eggs of their children inside of them. So when you hug your daughter, you're hugging your grandchildren. When you're being good to your partner, when she's pregnant, you're being good to your grandchildren. This is the miracle of being a woman.